Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Rundown. Today, I have my buddy Jappy joining us on the show. Today, we're going to do something that is a little different than the usual. Instead of talking about the Colts on today's episode, we're actually going to talk about some college football. Jappy's wearing some Georgia gear. I've got UC gear on, Michigan shirt underneath. So we're going to go ahead and cover the playoff matchups. And before I get into anything, I wanted to say, as everyone saw on the news yesterday, rest in peace to John Madden. Huge loss for the football community, made a huge impact on the NFL. And with this being a primary NFL podcast, had to make sure to cover that. But let's get right into it, starting off with the Cotton Bowl on Friday, number 4 UC versus number 1 Alabama.
Yeah. I have a lot of feelings about this one. I am not a fan of UC in any means. Being a Xavier student at heart, or a Musketeer at heart, I don't want to root for either of these teams. Both I hate fervently. So I don't know, man. Honestly, some part of me wants just for that, that Alabama game. So there's not that that idea of being like, there's an asterisk next to your name, we want to go back and, beat them.
Right.
But man, it also, I don't want to face that again. I want to have an easier time going against whoever, hopefully in the championship, if we do.
Sure.
And I would also hate to deal with all the UC fans, because that just sucks.
Because they're going to come to Xavier and be like, we don't have a football team. Cool.
Yeah.
On to the next conversation. You guys just lost to us in basketball by 20, but you guys will just keep bringing up our football team that we don't have.
Yeah.
I obviously am rooting for UC. My aunt was a graduate from there, so I'm cheering them on because of her. And they actually were the number 2 school that I was looking at going to before I decided on Xavier. And a couple of my best friends go there as well. So they have my support. I will say, Bama being number 1 in this matchup, I don't agree that they should have been number 1. Personally, I think that should have been Michigan, who Georgia is facing off against. Michigan was number 2 before Alabama took down number 1 Georgia in that SEC conference game. So the reason why I think the committee chose to match up Bama versus UC is, like you said, I think that they want to see Bama versus Georgia, the SEC dogs, and the national championship, because I think that they know that's going to bring in the most viewers. But I don't necessarily think Alabama is a lock for this game.
As much as I'd like to agree with you, I feel like it's going to be. I was talking to my my mother today, and I was talking about this game, and she was like, "What is the line? What is the score difference that they predict?" And they're like, "Oh, 13."
Yeah,
13
I would
and
be
a scared
half now.
I would be scared as an Alabama player going into that idea of just being like, "Oh, I was expecting a much higher difference to be suspected," but. Yeah, no. And then also I would like to go back on that idea of you being Michigan should be number 1. I maybe number 2, I would say.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go with number 1 because Alabama, they lost to Texas A&M, yes, but Michigan lost to Michigan State.
True.
And that was a much worse team in my perspective there. And and plus they beat us too, who were the reigning number 1 undefeated. So I feel like they have a valid spot at number 1, as much as I hate to say that, but they have a valid spot.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes as no surprise as Bama being the number 1 team, as they always are. Yeah. And they are favored by 13.5, large margin. But as I said, I don't think it's a lock that they win.
No.
So I do want to cover those points as to how UC could end up beating them. As you said, this is a team that lost to Texas A&M on the season. That was their first regular season loss, and I don't know the exact amount of time, but a long time.
Way too long.
Yeah. And not only did they lose to A&M, but they also almost lost to Auburn in a triple overtime game in the Iron Bowl this year with Auburn's quarterback banged up. I think Bama won that game by a field goal, maybe. I think it was on a field goal.
Because it had to go down to a 2-point conversion. So wasn't it by 2? Yeah. So
yeah, they did win by 2.
Even if it gets down to 3, a third overtime, that's just a sorry state for any team, let alone Bama.
Right.
And I that is the one thing that I have going for UC that I would say it's just like they went against Auburn, it may be their, maybe the Iron Bowl. And so these teams, they know each other in and out, but it's still a wacky sight to see for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. My bold claim as I'm cheering for UC is I think the Bearcats win if Desmond Ridder, who in a lot of people's opinions deserves to be in that Heisman conversation. I think that if Ridder can outplay the Heisman winner, Bryce Young, that UC wins. And the way that Ridder outplays Bryce Young is, number one, limiting turnovers. You don't give an SEC team extra opportunities and expect to win that game. If UC has 2 or 3 turnovers, there's no way they win that game. And also working the clock, time possession, keep the ball as long as you can. And that goes through Jerome Ford, their stud running back. I think that if Jerome Ford has 130 rushing yards, that's my claim, 130 rushing yards, and Ridder limits turnovers, I think Alabama can be taken down in this game.
Yeah, and we know that with Alabama, the main reason Auburn didn't win was because they didn't run that clock when they needed to.
Right.
And that was the final nail in the coffin. And it could be possible we come to see something like that to where it's just, you got to keep that endurance up to keep playing the game against Alabama.
Right. Yeah. So on the Alabama side of things, my only point is for them to play like they're Bama. Like we see that in the playoffs every single year. Saban's team, Roll Tide. If they play like the Tide, nobody's going to take them down.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've been through this so many times, man.
Yeah, especially as a Georgia fan.
I know how this shit goes out, and it's a rough one. It's always a rough one to be like, oh shit, next week is Bama. Yeah. And everybody says they want Bama until you're in that week prior and you're like, man, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if we were gonna do well.
Freaking Roll Tide. You never know what they're gonna bring at you.
No, you don't. And sometimes they lay lowball you, which is rare, and that's what you gotta hope for. The other times they will beat you into the dirt. So
yeah.
It's a rough one.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, before I give my score prediction, are there any other points that you want to throw into this game?
I mean, not really. You pretty laid it out. You laid it out well enough from my perspective. And I mean, really, it's just UC has to play a perfect game in my mind to really do it. And as much as I have no care about how this game goes, because either way I will be sad. Right. I just don't know how I'm gonna really feel, and or how I would back any point up I would give you right now. Yeah. Because I just don't care, because I know I'm just gonna be depressed. So
either we're gonna hear from students at UC saying, yeah, our team made it to the national championship, you guys have a team that doesn't exist.
Or Alabama's going to add another number to their helmets. Yeah. I just
exactly.
I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Well, I will say, I think Bama's going to win. The line's at 13.5. It'd be.
Oh yeah, I think Alabama will win. But also I'm not a betting man, so I'm not going to go too hard into any way or say anything.
All right. Well, I'll say my score prediction on this game, 30-17 Alabama.
Yeah, I see. If we're going by the predicted matchups for that 13.5, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
And I would say that's especially a good one because neither of their defenses are necessarily outstanding.
Sure. Yeah.
And they could definitely run up numbers if need be, but that also is based on a perfect game by UC. So
right. Yeah.
I would second your 30-17, I think.
Yeah. I also I'm one that pays attention to the line. I don't do sports betting myself. My dad does, and all I know is every single game that I've watched in the NFL this year, and a lot of the college football games and a lot of the bowl games that have already occurred, Vegas rarely misses. So I think if they're calling 13.5 will happen. There's a pretty good chance of that. Vegas is rarely off of their mark.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that as a general term. I would maybe just broaden it or section it down to maybe this year. But I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, you want to get into your dogs? I think you'll have a lot more to say on that one. I'll let you go ahead and
do.
Start that.
I think when it comes to these key points, I had to go with, as a Georgia fan, you're always thinking about like, okay, how are we going to get through this with the least resistance, right?
Yeah.
Because we're always just used to messing up in the worst ways possible in the playoffs. Yeah, go have fun. Take off your,
I gotta show up, bro. Carry on though. I'm listening to you.
Yeah. So, my immediate first thing was, okay, well, Michigan has had problems with COVID prior, so remain COVID free in my mind is a definite point for both teams, because then they just forfeit and can't play. So as long as you have a team that can play, I think both teams have a chance at winning at a 50-50 shot. I would say if we're going for, I'll start with Michigan first. I would think it is quite possible that they could find ways. They're going up against an enraged Georgia team because I feel like they should be done with this. It should be an easy walk, but they just lost. They lost that perfect season.
Right.
And so now you just got to they got played with last time. And if Michigan can recreate that in some way, whether find it in like the players or just find a way to mess their rhythm up and play those mind games, I think they could definitely have a shot at causing a lot of damage. But I would also say when doing so, you really have to watch out for the number 99, Jordan Davis, because he will mess things up. He will be a major, major problem.
Yeah.
And he, in my opinion, I would have loved to see him as the Heisman Trophy winner. He didn't get enough votes, but it's whatever. And I think, you really got to look at the diversifying their run game. Mm-hmm. And I personally really like JJ McCarthy in the way he plays, and he's got a magnificent way of running the ball. And they need to keep that option open if they're going to decide to play him, which I assume they will.
Yeah.
I know that they've had kind of a revolving door, to my knowledge, of QBs this year.
Yeah, between McNamara and McCarthy.
Yeah. And with that option, I think people need to, or not people, Michigan needs to keep that as a very valid option in those plays, right?
Yeah.
And one major problem that Georgia's been having is with our safety rotation and making sure that it's all tight and making sure it functions properly.